Today, we're going to get really personal. I want to share something with you that honestly took me over 3 decades of trial and error and a lot of suffering to finally figure out. We're going to walk through the 7 biggest health mistakes I've ever made, and my hope is that you can learn from them and not have to go through the same long, painful journey I did.
And I am not kidding when I say 30+ years. This isn't some textbook theory I read about. This is knowledge I paid for with my own health. Years of chronic fatigue, of pain, of just being frustrated and not knowing why I felt so bad. Getting this stuff right, it's a really big deal.
And I've got to be honest with you. Back when I was making these mistakes, you couldn't have told me anything. I was that guy who thought he knew it all. So I'm sharing this because if you can just stay a little more open-minded than I was, you could literally save yourself years, maybe even decades, of just unnecessary struggle.
Okay, let's just dive right in. The first major pitfall, the first big mistake, was this constant search for a magic fix. This is that trap of looking for the answer in a supplement bottle or some trendy cleanse, instead of looking at the most basic, foundational thing of all, what you're actually eating.
There was a time, and I'm not proud of this, when I was taking over 100 vitamins a day. Easily. I basically had a warehouse of supplements at home. Why? Well, I was desperate. I was dealing with chronic fatigue, I couldn't sleep, I had arthritis, and I was just looking for that one magic pill. But here's the lesson I learned the hard way. Supplements can't do a thing if your diet, your foundation is a mess, and mine was just terrible.
See, the reason my diet was failing so badly was that it was missing the big stuff, the macronutrients. I was on a vegan diet at the time, and for me, it just wasn't working. I wasn't getting enough quality protein to repair my body, and I wasn't getting enough healthy fat for real, sustained energy. The answer wasn't in all those bottles. It was in getting enough animal protein and healthy fats into my diet.
And mistake number 2, which was part of this same magic fix obsession, was falling for all the extreme detoxes and cleanses. Oh yeah, juice fasts, herbal cleanses, you name it, I tried it. But these things can do way more harm than good. They don't just flush out toxins, they flush out all the good stuff too. Your healthy gut bacteria, your essential minerals, and with juice cleanses, you're just chugging sugar all day. So your insulin is constantly spiked, you never even start burning fat, you just feel hungry, weak, and miserable.
And if you think I'm exaggerating about how dangerous this stuff can be, listen to this. During one of those so-called gallbladder cleanses, I had to drink so much olive oil that it literally started to solidify in my throat. I almost choked to death. I mean it. That's a lesson you don't forget. The answer is never in these extreme rituals. It's just in real, nourishing food.
So all of that leads us right into the next huge category of mistakes. And this was all about a fundamental misunderstanding of fuel. It's about what your body actually needs to run well versus what we think it needs. Mistake number 3. This is such a classic, isn't it? The old "I'll eat healthy later" excuse. In college, I basically lived on carbs, sugar, and coffee. I just kept telling myself, I'll deal with my health after I graduate. And what was the result? Well, it was predictable. I was exhausted all the time, I had constant brain fog, and then, after I graduated, I went vegan again, and for my body, that just made all the inflammation even worse.
And this is so important. I kept blaming how I felt on things like stress from my classes. But the real enemy was inside my own body. It was my blood sugar, which was on a wild roller coaster all day long because I was eating the wrong fuel. You know, if I had just eaten simple protein, like eggs back then, my energy, my focus, everything would have been different. Now here's a real paradox for you. Mistake number 4. Thinking that if a little bit of something is good, then a lot of it must be better. I got really into making these massive kale shakes every day. I thought I needed tons and tons of fiber. But guess what? Overloading my system like that just led to bloating and inflammation. And of course, to make these things even drinkable, I had to dump in a bunch of fruit, which was really just a sneaky way of adding a whole lot of sugar.
Okay, so this next group of mistakes is a big one. It's all about misreading my body's signals. See, the problem is we so often end up treating a symptom without ever figuring out what the real problem is. This part is all about learning to be a better detective for your own health.
So let me ask you this before we go on. Just think about it for a second. Is there any chance that a symptom you're dealing with right now is actually pointing to a totally different problem somewhere else in your body? It's a really critical question. Let me give you an example from my own life.
So for mistake number 5, for years, I mean years, I had this constant nagging pain in my right shoulder. I went to chiropractors, massage therapists. I thought it was a muscle problem, a joint problem, but it never went away. You know what the real cause was? It was referred pain from my gallbladder. My shoulder was just the messenger, trying to tell me something was wrong somewhere else.
And then there's mistake number 6. Just look at this list of problems. They seem totally unrelated, right? Kidney stones, muscle cramps, awful insomnia, and just crushing fatigue. Well, I had all of them. And it turns out every single one of those issues could be traced back to one single overlooked thing. I had a severe magnesium deficiency. All right, this brings us to our 7th and final mistake, which also happens to be the most powerful lesson I ever learned. And it's a completely counterintuitive idea that sometimes the biggest breakthroughs in your health don't come from adding something new, but from taking something away. In this case, taking away how often you eat. You know, when I first heard about intermittent fasting, I think my reaction was probably like a lot of people's. I was completely skeptical. I thought, that's nothing. How could not doing something possibly be the answer? But what I was about to find out was a total game changer.
The results were just wow. They were dramatic. By just shifting from constantly grazing all day long to eating just 2 meals a day, I went from 211 pounds down to 185. The puffiness in my face, which is a classic sign of high insulin, it just disappeared. I stopped living on this constant drip of sugar and finally taught my body how to burn its own fat for fuel.
And here's the really simple science behind why this mistake is so common. Every single time you eat, even a small snack, you raise your insulin. Our bodies just weren't designed to be eating all day long. And this constant snacking, it's at the heart of so many of our modern health problems because it never gives our insulin a chance to come back down.
So, after 30 years of chasing magic pills, doing crazy cleanses, using the wrong fuel, and totally misreading my body's signals, it all boils down to these 4 incredibly powerful principles. First, fix your diet before you even think about supplements. Second, fuel your body with protein and healthy fat, not sugar. Third, become a detective and look for the real root cause of your symptoms. And finally, maybe the most powerful of all, eat less often.
Ultimately, the biggest lesson from this whole 30-year journey was to stop looking for things to add and to start fixing the foundation. It's a huge shift in thinking. So the question I really want to leave you with is this. Now that you've seen my mistakes, what is one foundational change you can make, starting today?
You know that feeling when you're trying to do everything right for your health, but you're just not getting the results you want? Well, today we're going to dive into 4 huge health mistakes learned the hard way over 30 years, so you can skip all that frustration and get right to what actually works. I mean, think about that. Imagine if you could get a 30-year head start on your own health journey. That's really the whole point of this explainer, to give you the Cliff's Notes from someone else's long, winding road so you can just sidestep the big mistakes that cause years of misery. Okay, let's jump into mistake number 1. And this one is a classic. It's all about chasing a symptom, a pain, without ever stopping to ask, hey, where is this actually coming from? It's a super frustrating loop to be stuck in, especially when the real problem is hiding in plain sight. So for years, the problem was this nagging, persistent pain in the right shoulder. And, you do the logical things. You go to chiropractors, you see massage therapists, you do the physical therapy. The shoulder gets poked, prodded, and worked on over and over again, but the relief never lasts. The pain just always came back. And this is the question that changes everything. It flips the whole approach on its head. What if all that time, all that effort, all that money spent focusing on the shoulder was aimed at the completely wrong target? What if the shoulder was just the messenger, the alarm bell, and not the actual fire? This gets into this fascinating idea called referred pain. Your body is this incredibly complex network of nerves, and when an internal organ is struggling, it can send out a red flag signal that travels along a shared nerve pathway, making you feel pain in a totally different spot. And here is the big aha moment. The real culprit behind that chronic right shoulder pain was the gallbladder. A constant tightness under the right rib cage was a sign of thick, sluggish bile, and that tension was referring pain right up into the shoulder. So you see, no amount of shoulder massage in the world was ever going to fix a struggling gallbladder. Okay, moving on to mistake number 2. And you'll see a theme here. It's another case of missing the real problem. This time, it was about dismissing a really simple idea without truly understanding the profound effect it has on your body's hormones. When intermittent fasting first started getting popular, this was a pretty common thought. It just sounded too simple, right? How could not eating possibly be more important than what you're eating? Well, the answer, as it turns out, is all about hormones. Let's break this down because it's actually pretty simple. Every single time you eat, even a little snack, your body releases insulin. So if you're grazing all day long, your insulin levels stay high all day long, which basically tells your body to store fat. But when you create some space between meals, insulin gets a chance to fall, and that flips a metabolic switch that tells your body, hey, it's time to start burning our stored fat for energy. And the result of just flipping that one simple switch? A 26-pound weight drop. This didn't come from some crazy diet plan, but just from changing the timing of the meals to fix that root hormonal issue of constantly elevated insulin. But you know what? It was about way more than just the numbers on the scale. Facial swelling and puffy eyes completely disappeared. Turns out that wasn't even fat. It was fluid retention, a classic sign of insulin resistance. And that constant feeling of being hungry, that wasn't real hunger. It was just the feeling of low blood sugar, a sign of being totally dependent on carbs for fuel.
So this brings us to mistake number 3. And this one is so important because it shows how you can have the absolute best intentions and still get it wrong. This is the story of how even a super healthy habit can totally backfire.
The habit was a massive kale shake every single day. I mean, it sounds healthy, right? The idea was more is better, but there was a hidden downside. First, that sheer amount of raw fiber caused a ton of bloating and inflammation. And second, to make a giant kale shake taste even remotely good, you gotta add fruit, which means you're also adding a huge hidden load of sugar and carbs.
So the huge lesson learned here is this: never ever start your day with a sweet, carb-heavy meal. Starting your day with protein gives you stable, steady energy. But starting with sugar, even if it's from a healthy smoothie, just sets you up for a roller coaster of cravings and hunger all day long.
All right, on to our final and, honestly, maybe one of the most widespread mistakes of all. We're talking about ignoring a critical mineral deficiency that can show up as a dozen different health problems, all pointing back to one single root cause.
So just take a look at these symptoms. On the surface, they seem completely random, right? Kidney stones, muscle cramps, you can't sleep, you're tired all the time. You could see a different doctor for every single one of these. But what if they're not separate problems at all? What if they're all just different branches of the same tree?
And that root cause, so often, is a magnesium deficiency. Here's a simple way to think about it. Calcium and magnesium are like an on-off switch for your muscles. Calcium tells your muscles to contract, to tense up. Magnesium tells them to relax. So if you don't have enough magnesium, calcium just takes over and your muscles get stuck in the on position. That's where you get cramps, spasms, and tension. Magnesium also plays a key role in preventing kidney stones by keeping calcium in check.
So you might be wondering, why is everyone so deficient in the stuff? Well, historically, we got a ton of magnesium naturally from drinking mineral-rich well water. But modern city water treatment filters a lot of these essential minerals right out. We basically lost a primary source of this crucial mineral without even knowing it. So, we've talked about referred pain, hormonal chaos from snacking, healthy habits that backfire, and missing minerals. When you pull back and look at all of it, what's the one big lesson that ties all these mistakes together? This is it. This is the whole game. The common thread running through every single one of these mistakes is that real, lasting health isn't about patching up symptoms as they appear, it's about understanding the root. The most powerful question you can ever ask is not what, but why. Find the root cause, and you find the real solution. So now you know the big mistakes to avoid, which is a massive first step. But that leads to the obvious next question, right? What should you be doing? Understanding the why behind the problems is the foundation. Now it's time to build a what for the solution.